So me have to work, 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 work. You see me do me dirt, 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 dirt. So me better work, 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 work. When you walk a line, 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 line. I'm in the cafe, my ta, 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 ta.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special Emancipation edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. So a lot of Rihanna's music has always been heavily inspired by dancehall, and with her new album slated to feature an extensive amount of dancehall, the discussion has started again. Is this simply Rihanna drawing on her Caribbean roots, or is this some form of cultural appropriation of Jamaican dancehall? What exactly is cultural appropriation? Is it a real concern for us here in the Caribbean, for our creators, our innovators, and our cultural art forms such as dance, such as music, such as even here? Well, we're going to be talking about all that in this week's edition of the program, and joining me in studio we have Kerry Ann Henry. She is Dean of the School of Dance at the Edna Manley College of Visual and the Performing Arts. Eva Cooper also with us. He chairs the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association, and of course I don't have to mention his third world roots. Dr. Kai Barrett also with us, lecturer at the University of Technology, and Dr. Sanja Stanley Nair, Director of the Institute of Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies. Before we go into Rihanna, though, who seems to be a flashpoint for the accusation of cultural appropriation, let me ask our guests first, what is cultural appropriation? Dr. Barrett, can I start with you? What is that? Is that a real thing?
I think, yes, Dion, I think it is a real thing, where we have an oppressor using the culture of an oppressed group, usually a minority group, for some sort of benefit, and reinforcing probably racist or ethnic ideologies.
Okay, because I looked it up in the Oxford dictionaries, and the definition they give, because it's interesting hearing you use the language of the oppressor and the oppressed, because the definition in Oxford is the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of customs, practices of one people or society by members of another, and typically more dominant people and society. That sounds as if, for instance, one culture can borrow from ours, perhaps, but we can't borrow from another. How does that work? Ibo, let me bring you in first.
Well, we look at the situation where in Europe and North America for a long time, whenever they were searching for something new in their art forms, they had no apology to borrow from the, you to use the phrase, the oppressed people, literally the slaves. And this goes back even to classical music. Debussy did it. When the African-American sound came in, they borrowed it and used it and called it French music in the Impressionist period, right? And what upsets me sometimes is the lack of acknowledgement of where it's coming from. For example, using the Debussy thing, when we were taught classical music, they would tell us that Debussy came with this sound and it was new at the time. And even later on, people learning jazz would learn that certain chords, oh, well, you know, Ravel and Debussy were using those chords. It was later on, believe it or not, BBC ran a special to expose that they were using harmonic structures that were coming from the African-American roots that we now know as jazz. You see what I'm saying? So it's when you do these things and you don't say where it come from, you don't acknowledge, because those people were nothing more than a case study like in a lab. But you take their thing and make it your thing.
Just before I go back to the others, is that the key then for you, Dr. Barrett, whether it's acknowledged and whether it's the oppressor borrowing from the oppressed or formerly
acknowledgement is a key part of it. And when you don't give the acknowledgement where it's due, it's stealing, basically, right? I think that's where the appropriation comes in. But because the group is minority, because we don't see them as a real group, somebody who could, you know, give some real cultural contribution, then everything is totally erased. And then that ownership belongs to the oppressor, right, or the dominant culture. And that's where we have the problem.
Good example is bashment in the Oxford Dictionary.
Bashment is in Oxford Dictionary
Yep.
now? Okay, I never know that.
And
As what?
Well, Oxford is an English dictionary.